The sun hung low and merciless over the Texas plains, painting the parched earth in shades of rust and gold. Eleanor Whitlow stood at the edge of her father's modest homestead, her pale blue dress already dusty from the morning's wind. At 19, she had never ventured more than 10 miles from this spot, had never known a man's touch beyond a polite handshake at Sunday service. Now, as she watched the dust cloud rising in the distance, she knew her sheltered life was about to end. "Eleanor," her father's voice cracked like dry leather. Reverend Samuel Whitlow had aged 10 years in the past month, ever since the bloodshed began. 7 white settlers dead, including the Henderson's boy, who'd barely turned 16. 9 Comanche warriors fallen in retaliation. The violence spiraled like a prairie fire, threatening to consume everything in its path. "They're coming, Papa," she whispered, her hands trembling as she smoothed her skirts. She'd sewn this dress herself, never imagining it would serve as her wedding gown. The Reverend's weathered face crumpled. "Forgive me, child. God forgive me for what I've agreed to." Eleanor wanted to comfort him, to say she understood. But understanding and accepting were different things entirely. She was to be given like a prize heifer, a living treaty to bind peace between two peoples who'd spent years teaching their children to hate. The Comanche wanted assurance that the whites would honor the new boundary lines. The settlers demanded guarantee that the raids would stop, and Eleanor, virgin daughter of a poor preacher, had become the seal on their bargain. The riders emerged from the heat shimmer like ghosts becoming flesh. 3 white men from the Territorial Council, Mayor Josiah Pike among them, his thick mustache unable to hide his satisfied smirk. Behind them rode 5 Comanche warriors, their faces painted, their dark eyes scanning the homestead with practiced wariness. Eleanor's breath caught. She had seen Indians before, trading at the fort, but never this close, never as kin. One warrior sat slightly apart from the others, younger than she'd expected, perhaps 23 or 24 summers. His name, she'd been told, was Tama, though Mayor Pike had sneered calling him Red Hawk like it was some child's game. He wore buckskin leggings and a cloth shirt, his long black hair adorned with a single eagle feather. His face bore no paint, and his dark eyes found hers across the distance with an intensity that made her stomach clench. "Miss Whitlow." Mayor Pike dismounted, not bothering to remove his hat. "The terms have been finalized. Chief Quanah Parker has agreed to recognize the new boundaries, provided you go willingly to seal the peace." Willingly. The word tasted like ashes. What choice did she have? Refuse, and the killing would continue. Her father's congregation would brand them responsible for every death that followed. Tama dismounted with fluid grace, his moccasins raising no dust. He approached slowly, as one might approach a spooked mare. When he stood before her, Eleanor realized he was taller than she'd thought, broad-shouldered and lean like a man who knew hunger and hardship intimately. He said something in Comanche, his voice lower than she'd expected, almost gentle. The oldest warrior translated in broken English. "He says, you are small, like prairie bird. He asks if you come, no chains." Eleanor lifted her chin, finding courage in defiance. "Tell him I come because I must, for peace, nothing more." The elder translated. Something flickered in Tama's eyes. Disappointment? Relief? He nodded once and turned back to his horse. "You'll ride with them now," Mayor Pike announced. Already mounting his own horse. "Your belongings? I've packed what little I need." Eleanor's voice sounded steadier than she felt. One small trunk, her mother's Bible, a few dresses, her sewing kit. What else did a woman need for a life she couldn't imagine? Her father pulled her into a desperate embrace. "Be strong, my Eleanor. God goes with you." She wanted to ask why God would send her to live among heathens, why her virtue and innocence should pay for men's violence. But she only nodded, breathing in the familiar scent of his tobacco and sweat one last time. The Comanche had brought a spare horse, a spotted mare with gentle eyes. Eleanor had ridden before, but always side saddle, always properly. Now she bunched her skirts awkwardly, trying to mount while maintaining some dignity. Without warning, strong hands circled her waist, lifting her easily onto the horse. Tama stepped back immediately, but the brief contact left her skin burning through the fabric of her dress. They rode in silence as the sun began its descent. Eleanor had never been this far from home, had never seen the endless sweep of grassland without a white structure to break the horizon. The Comanche riders formed a loose circle around her, not quite guards, not quite companions. As darkness approached, they made camp near a small creek. Eleanor watched, fascinated despite herself, as the men efficiently erected a hide tent and started a fire with practiced ease. They moved like parts of the same body, each knowing his role without words. Tama approached her as she stood uncertainly by her horse. He gestured to the tent, then to her, his meaning clear. This would be their dwelling, their marriage tent. Fear clawed at her throat. She knew what happened between men and women. Her mother had explained, briefly and with much blushing, before she died. The marriage bed was a wife's duty. She'd said, to be endured for the sake of children. But her mother had chosen her father, had loved him despite his poverty. This was different. This was... Tama must have seen the terror in her eyes. He held up a hand, palm out, and shook his head. He pointed to himself, then to the ground outside the tent, then to her, and inside the tent, alone. Eleanor's relief was so intense her knees nearly buckled. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Inside the tent, buffalo hides covered the ground, softer than she'd expected. A small fire pit in the center would provide warmth. Her trunk had been placed near the back. It was sparse but clean, smelling of smoke and sage. She sat on the hides, still in her dusty dress, and listened to the men talking in their language around the fire. Their voices rose and fell like music she didn't understand. Sometimes she heard laughter. Once, she was certain she heard her name, or what they called her, Ekano. When full dark came, Tama entered the tent. Eleanor tensed, but he only added wood to the fire pit and laid out his own bedding on the opposite side, as far from her as the small space allowed. He removed his shirt, and in the firelight, she glimpsed scars across his back and chest. Old wounds, white men's bullets, most likely. He caught her staring, and something hard entered his expression. He spoke in Comanche, his tone cold, then lay down with his back to her. Eleanor understood without translation. He was as trapped as she was. Neither of them had chosen this. She lay down fully clothed, her mother's Bible clutched to her chest. Outside, coyotes howled at the rising moon. The creek gurgled softly. The fire crackled and settled. "Dear Lord," she whispered into the darkness, "I don't know your plan. I don't understand why I'm here. But please, please don't let me lose myself in this place." Across the fire, Tama's breathing hadn't changed. She knew he was awake, probably understanding more English than he let on. Somehow, knowing he couldn't sleep either made the vast loneliness a little more bearable. When she finally dozed, she dreamed of her mother's garden, of hymns sung in church, of a life where her choices were her own. She woke once to find Tama gone, but his footsteps outside the tent told her he kept watch. As dawn approached, painting the tent walls pink and gold, Eleanor made a decision. She could waste away in fear and self-pity, or she could find a way to survive this, perhaps even to understand it. She rose, smoothed her wrinkled dress, and stepped outside. Tama sat by the dying fire, feeding his horse pieces of dried meat. He glanced up, surprise flickering across his features. Eleanor pointed to herself, then to the horse, then made a washing motion. The creek, she needed to clean herself. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. He said something to one of the older women who joined their group. Eleanor hadn't noticed when, and the woman gestured for Eleanor to follow. At the creek, hidden by cottonwoods from the camp, Eleanor washed her face and hands, fixed her hair as best she could. The woman watched silently, her weathered face unreadable. When they returned, the camp was already being broken down. Another day's ride to reach the Comanche band. Another day closer to a life Eleanor couldn't imagine. As Tama helped her mount, his touch still carefully impersonal, their eyes met. For just a moment, she saw past his warrior's mask to something else. Uncertainty, perhaps even kindness. Then it was gone, and they rode on across the endless prairie, toward a future neither of them had chosen, but both must somehow endure. The Comanche camp sprawled across the valley like a living thing. Dozens of hide lodges arranged in careful patterns Eleanor didn't understand. Children ran between the dwellings, their laughter sharp in the morning air. Dogs barked, horses grazed in the distance, watched by young boys who stared openly as the wedding party arrived. Eleanor's arrival caused a ripple of activity. Women emerged from their lodges, speaking rapidly in Comanche, their eyes hard as flint when they looked at her. She didn't need translation to understand their words. White woman, enemy, unwanted. Tama led her to a lodge set slightly apart from the others, larger than the traveling tent. It was decorated with painted symbols, horses, suns, what might have been battle scenes. Inside, the space was organized with a precision that surprised her. Parfleche bags hung from the lodge poles. Buffalo robes were stacked neatly. A woman's domain, clearly maintained with care. An elderly woman sat near the fire, her face a map of wrinkles, her clouded eyes suggesting blindness or near blindness. She spoke at length to Tama, her tone gentle but firm. He answered in short phrases, his voice carrying a respect Eleanor hadn't heard before. "Nakai," he said, gesturing between Eleanor and the old woman. Then, haltingly in English, "My grandmother." Eleanor curtsied awkwardly, unsure of proper etiquette. The old woman laughed, a sound like dry leaves rustling, and said something that made Tama's jaw tighten. He left without translation, and Eleanor stood frozen, unsure what to do. The grandmother beckoned her closer, patting the ground beside her. Eleanor sat, her stays digging into her ribs, her dress pooling around her like spilled milk. The old woman reached out, her gnarled fingers surprisingly gentle as they touched Eleanor's face, her hair, the fabric of her dress. She made disapproving sounds at the whalebone stays, the multiple petticoats, the tiny buttons marching down Eleanor's spine. Over the following days, Eleanor learned the rhythm of the camp through observation and painful trial. She woke to the sound of women preparing morning meals, the smoke from countless fires creating a haze that made her eyes water. The women ignored her at first, talking around her as if she were a ghost. She tried to help, to show willingness, but everything she did was wrong. She didn't know how to prepare buffalo meat. Her attempts to tan hide left it stiff and useless. She burned the simple flatbread, wasted precious water, scattered beads she was supposed to sort. The younger women laughed behind their hands. One, particularly beautiful with elaborate tattoos on her chin, seemed to take special pleasure in Eleanor's failures. She would demonstrate a task once, rapidly, then watch with mock sympathy as Eleanor fumbled. Tama appeared only at night, always maintaining careful distance. He brought her food, dried meat, berries, a kind of tea that tasted of earth and green things. He never ate with her, taking his meals with the men, but he ensured she never went hungry. One evening, a week into her new life, Eleanor fell ill. The buffalo meat, richer and heavier than anything she'd eaten before, sat like lead in her stomach. Combined with the stress and strangeness, her body rebelled violently. She stumbled outside the lodge, retching into the scrub grass, tears streaming down her face. The beautiful woman with the tattooed chin pointed and laughed, calling others to witness the weak white woman's distress. Eleanor wanted to die, to sink into the earth and disappear. She crawled back toward the lodge on hands and knees, her dignity shattered. Strong arms lifted her. Tama carried her inside without a word, settling her on the buffalo robes. She curled into herself, shaking with humiliation and sickness. Through the night, fever claimed her. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes aware of a cool cloth on her forehead, water pressed to her lips. In her delirium, she called for her mother, long dead these 7 years. She begged for home, for her narrow bed, for anything familiar. When she woke, weak but clear-headed, sunlight slanted through the lodge's smoke hole. Tama sat beside her, his face haggard with exhaustion. He'd stayed with her, nursed her through the fever. "Why?" she croaked, her throat raw. He didn't answer, but helped her sit up, supporting her back with surprising gentleness. The grandmother entered, carrying a bowl of thin broth that smelled of herbs and something medicinal. She spoke sharply to Tama, who ducked his head like a scolded boy. Eleanor sipped the broth slowly, her stomach gradually settling. The old woman's medicine worked better than anything in her father's meager collection of remedies. That afternoon, as Eleanor recovered, Tama surprised her. He pointed to various objects in the lodge, speaking their Comanche names slowly, clearly. Kani, lodge, puha, medicine, pia, mother. Eleanor repeated the words clumsily, her tongue struggling with the unfamiliar sounds, when she got one particularly wrong. Tama's stern expression cracked. Not quite a smile, but close. She pointed to herself. "Eleanor." He shook his head, said something in Comanche, then tried again in English. "Eka no, too hard. Your name." He thought for a moment. "Suvada." "What does it mean?" He made a flying motion with his hand. "Small bird. Swift." She should have been offended. Perhaps reduced to a sparrow. But something in his tone suggested it wasn't meant as insult. Swifts were quick, agile, survivors. "Suvada," she repeated. And this time he did smile. Just a flash before his face returned to its usual stoic mask. The language lessons became routine. Each evening, after Tama returned from hunting or council, he would spend an hour teaching her words. Simple things at first: water, food, horse, sky. Then more complex concepts: friend, enemy, tomorrow, yesterday. Eleanor began to understand fragments of conversation around her. The women still mocked her, but now she caught words. Clumsy, stupid, ugly, pale skin. It hurt, but knowing hurt less than wondering. One morning, the beautiful woman with the tattooed chin, Ayana, Eleanor had learned, deliberately knocked over a water vessel Eleanor had just filled. The precious water carried from the stream a quarter-mile away, soaked into the dusty ground. "Stupid white woman," Ayana said in broken English, ensuring Eleanor understood. Something snapped in Eleanor. Months of fear, frustration, and humiliation crystallized into rage. She stood slowly, meeting Ayana's eyes. "Yes," she said in careful Comanche. "I am stupid. I am clumsy. But I am here. I am learning. You are cruel, small." The camp seemed to freeze. Women stopped their work. Children halted mid-play. Ayana's face darkened with fury. Before Eleanor could react, Ayana lunged forward, grabbing Eleanor's carefully pinned hair, yanking hard enough to bring tears. Eleanor fought back instinctively, her months of physical labor having strengthened her more than she realized. They grappled in the dust, neither truly knowing how to fight, both driven by accumulated resentment. Eleanor felt her dress tear, tasted blood where she'd bitten her tongue. "Enough!" Tama's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He pulled them apart, his face thunderous. He spoke rapidly in Comanche, his words making several women gasp. Ayana slunk away, but not before shooting Eleanor a look of pure venom. Tama turned to Eleanor. Her dress was ruined, her hair wild. Dirt and blood smeared across her face, but she stood straight, chin raised, meeting his gaze without flinching. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps. He called for his grandmother, who tisked over Eleanor's injuries while shooting disapproving looks at her grandson. That night, Tama brought something unexpected. A Comanche dress, soft doeskin, simpler than her ruined calico, but infinitely more practical. Eleanor fingered the careful beadwork, the fringe that would move with her instead of catching on every bush. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, then surprised her again. "You fought well. Like Badger, small but fierce." It was the longest English sentence he'd spoken. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with embarrassment. "Will Ayana cause more trouble?" "No, I have Spoken. You are my wife. To disrespect you is to disrespect me. She understands now. My wife. The words sent an unexpected shiver through Eleanor. In all these weeks, she'd thought of herself as captive, as peace offering, as unwanted burden. But wife, that suggested something else, something that frightened and intrigued her in equal measure. As Tama turned to leave for his usual place outside, Eleanor found herself calling out, "Stay!" He froze, his back to her. Not for... She struggled to find words in either language. "It's cold. The wind is strong tonight. You must be tired of sleeping on the ground." He turned slowly. In the firelight, she could see the war in his face. Duty against desire. Propriety against simple human need for warmth and comfort. Finally, he nodded. He laid his bedding at a careful distance from hers. But inside the lodge, progress, Eleanor thought. Small steps toward something neither of them could yet name. As she drifted toward sleep, wearing the soft Comanche dress, she heard him whisper something in his language. She caught only one word she recognized. Suvada, swift. Tomorrow she would continue learning. She would master the bread making, understand the complex social hierarchies, find her place in this strange new world. But tonight, for the first time since leaving her father's house, she felt something other than fear or despair. Perhaps Tama was right. Perhaps she was like the swift, small but fierce, able to adapt, to survive, even to thrive in unexpected places. And perhaps this marriage, born of violence and necessity, might yet become something more. The wind howled outside, but the lodge was warm. Across the dying fire, she could hear Tama's steady breathing. Not quite trust, not quite love, but no longer the careful silence of strangers. It was a beginning. The morning air bit sharp and clean as Eleanor, Suvada, she reminded herself, watched Tama prepare for the hunt. He moved with practiced efficiency, checking his bow, selecting arrows, murmuring to his paint horse in low, soothing tones. 3 weeks had passed since their fight with Ayana, and the camp's attitude toward her had shifted from open hostility to wary acceptance. "You come," Tama said suddenly, not looking at her. Eleanor started. "What?" "Hunt. You come. Learn." The other warriors exchanged glances. Taking women on hunts was not unheard of, but taking the white woman? Even Tama's cousin, Nokoni, voiced objection in rapid Comanche. Tama's response was brief and final. He brought forward a gentle mare, already saddled with a simpler rig than Eleanor had ever seen. No side saddle pretense here. Eleanor had learned to ride astride in her Comanche dress. But this would be different. This would be keeping pace with warriors across rough terrain, staying silent when silence meant survival. They rode out as the sun painted the eastern sky pink and gold. 5 warriors, and her. The men largely ignored her presence, speaking among themselves about tracks, weather signs, the movement of game. The landscape changed as they traveled north. The endless grassland gave way to broken country, ravines cutting deep into red earth, stands of juniper and mesquite providing cover. Eleanor's thighs ached from gripping the horse, but she refused to show weakness. By midday, they found signs of buffalo. Not the great herds, those had moved elsewhere, but a small group, perhaps 20 animals, enough to provide meat for the band if they were careful, skillful. Tama motioned for Eleanor to stay back with the horses while the men crept forward. She wanted to protest. She'd come to learn, hadn't she? But wisdom kept her silent. She held the horses, watching as the warriors disappeared into the tall grass like ghosts. The attack, when it came, was swift and brutal. The warriors rose as one, arrows flying. A young buffalo fell, then another. The rest of the herd thundered away, the ground shaking beneath their hooves. Eleanor watched Tama work, the fluid draw of his bow, the certainty of his movements. This was his element, where the reserved man she knew transformed into something wild and free. Then everything went wrong. A lone bull, wounded but not fallen, charged from the brush. It caught Nokoni broadside, tossing him like a child's doll. The warrior hit the ground hard and didn't move. Without thinking, Eleanor kicked her mare forward. The buffalo turned, blood streaming from its flanks, rage in its small eyes. It lowered its massive head to charge again. Eleanor had no weapon, no plan. She simply rode between the bull and the fallen warrior, screaming at the top of her lungs, a sound of pure terror and defiance. The bull hesitated, confused by this new threat. That moment was enough. Tama's arrow found its heart. The beast stumbled, fell to its knees, and died. Eleanor slid from her horse, her legs barely holding her. Nokoni groaned, alive but clutching his ribs. The other warriors surrounded them, their faces showing something she hadn't seen before: respect. Tama knelt beside his cousin, checking injuries with the gentle hands. Satisfied Nokoni would survive. He turned to Eleanor. His dark eyes held a storm of emotions. "Foolish," he said in English. "Brave, foolish. I couldn't watch him die." Eleanor replied, surprised to find herself answering in Comanche. That night, they camped in a sheltered canyon. The buffalo had been butchered, the choice parts packed for transport. Nokoni, ribs bound, rested against a fallen log. He called Eleanor over, speaking slowly so she could understand. "You have the heart of a warrior," he said. "I was wrong about you. White woman, no, Suvada. You are Suvada now." Around the fire, the informal barriers broke down. The warriors shared their food with her, included her in their conversation. One showed her how to properly maintain a bow. Another demonstrated the best way to read tracks in different soils. As darkness fell, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of snow. The men built the fire higher, but cold seeped through everything. "Storm comes," Tama said, studying the sky. "We stay here tonight, move when it passes." They had only basic shelters, buffalo hide lean-tos that would barely block wind, much less snow. Eleanor shivered despite her warm dress and the buffalo robe someone had given her. The storm hit near midnight. Not the gentle snows she remembered from occasional Texas winters, but a brutal assault of wind and ice. The fire guttered and died. Even the warriors, hardy as they were, huddled together for warmth. Eleanor couldn't stop shaking. Her hands and feet went numb. She tried to be strong, to not show weakness, but her body betrayed her. Without word or warning, Tama pulled her against him. His arms encircled her, his buffalo robe covering them both. She stiffened, but he simply held her, sharing his warmth as practically as he'd share food or water. "No shame in cold," he murmured. "Even warriors freeze." Gradually, Eleanor relaxed. This close, she could smell sage and smoke on his skin, feel the steady beat of his heart. His body radiated heat like a furnace. Slowly, painfully, feeling returned to her extremities. The storm raged through the night. At some point, exhaustion overtook embarrassment. Eleanor slept, her head on Tama's shoulder, his arms keeping her safe from more than just cold. She woke to stillness and pale light. The storm had passed, leaving the world transformed in white. Tama still held her, though she sensed he'd been awake for some time. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, suddenly aware of their intimate position. But when she tried to pull away, he held her a moment longer. "You saved Nokoni," he said quietly. "Why? He has not been kind to you." Eleanor considered. "He's your family, and I'm tired of death, so tired of people dying for stupid reasons." Something shifted in Tama's expression. His hand came up, hesitant, to touch her face. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone with impossible gentleness. "You are not what I expected," he admitted. "What did you expect?" "Weak, afraid, useless." His hand dropped. "I was wrong. Like Nokoni was wrong." They broke apart as the other warriors stirred. But something fundamental had changed between them. The careful distance Tama maintained was gone, replaced by... what? Eleanor didn't have words for it yet. The journey back to camp took 2 days through the snow. Eleanor rode beside Tama now, not behind. He pointed out things as they traveled: winter bare trees that would provide medicine come spring, the tracks of various animals, the signs that marked Comanche territory. When they finally reached camp, The whole band turned out to greet them. News of Eleanor's actions had somehow preceded them. The women looked at her differently now. Even Ayanna offered a grudging nod. That evening, as Eleanor helped distribute the fresh meat, she noticed a change in how she was addressed. Not the white woman anymore, but Suvada, Swift. She had earned her name. Grandmother, as Eleanor had taken to thinking of Tama's ancient relative, pulled her aside. The old woman pressed something into Eleanor's hands, a bone awl and sinew thread. "You make," she said in broken English, then switched to slow Comanche. "Make shirt. For him. Winter comes. Warriors need warm clothes from their women. Their women. Their wives." Eleanor looked across the camp to where Tama consulted with other hunters about the next expedition. As if feeling her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the firelit distance, and he almost smiled. That night, he again slept inside the lodge without her asking, still at careful distance, but inside, as Eleanor worked by firelight, learning to pierce tough hide with the bone awl. She was deeply aware of his presence. "Eleanor," he said suddenly, using her real name for the first time in weeks. She looked up from her work. "I need to tell you something. About this." He gestured to the scar she'd noticed that first night, a long pale line across his shoulder. "About why I agreed to this marriage." Eleanor set aside her sewing, giving him full attention. 3 summers ago, soldiers attacked our camp, dawn raid, women and children. His voice roughened. "My sister, she was 15. They shot her as she ran." Eleanor's breath caught. "I'm sorry. I wanted war." "Wanted to kill every white man I saw. But Quanah, our chief, he said revenge would bring only more death. When the peace talks came, when they asked for marriage to seal the treaty." He looked at her directly. "I volunteered. Not from nobility. From hate. I thought to take a white woman, make her suffer as we suffered." The words should have frightened Eleanor. Instead, she felt only sadness for the pain that drove them. "And now," she asked softly, "now I see a woman who risks her life for my cousin, who learns our ways without complaint, who fights when mocked but shows kindness to children and elders." He paused. "I do not hate you, Eleanor Suvada. I do not know what I feel, but it is not hate." The confession hung between them like morning mist. Eleanor found herself moving closer, drawn by something stronger than fear or propriety. "I hated too," she admitted. "Hated being given away. Hated your people for demanding it. Hated you for accepting." She touched his hand tentatively. "But hate is heavy. I'm tired of carrying it." His fingers closed around hers, calloused, strong, but careful as if she might break. "What do we do now?" he asked. "We who were enemies." Eleanor thought of the bitter cold in the canyon. How naturally they'd turned to each other for warmth. How right it had felt. "We survive," she said. "Together. And maybe we find something better than what we expected." Tama turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm as if reading a map to unknown territory. "Maybe," he agreed. Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside the lodge, warmed by fire and something newer, more fragile than flame, 2 people sat in comfortable silence, not yet lovers, more than strangers, finding their way one careful step at a time through the storm-changed landscape of possibility. Winter had settled deep into the bones of the land. Eleanor's fingers, once soft from a life of needlework and prayer books, now bore calluses from scraping hides and grinding corn. The doeskin shirt she'd made for Tama fit him well, and she'd caught him running his fingers over the decorative quill work when he thought she wasn't looking. Their relationship had evolved into something Eleanor couldn't quite name. They shared the lodge peacefully, talked in a mixture of Comanche and English, worked side by side, but the careful distance remained, a boundary neither quite dared to cross, until the day Ayanna changed everything. Eleanor was returning from the stream, water vessels balanced carefully, when she heard the commotion. Women's voices raised in anger, children scattering. At the center of it, Ayanna stood with 2 other young women, holding up Eleanor's mother's Bible. "Look," Ayanna said loudly in Comanche. "The white woman keeps her magic book. She prays to her weak god to curse us all." Eleanor's heart clenched. The Bible was her last connection to her mother, to the life before. She'd kept it hidden, taking it out only when alone to trace the familiar words. "Give it back," Eleanor said, setting down the water vessels carefully. Ayanna laughed, waving the book above her head. "Why? So you can work your spells? Maybe this is why the buffalo grow scarce. Maybe this is why—" She didn't finish. Eleanor lunged forward, desperate to save her mother's Bible. Ayanna jerked it away, and the old binding, weathered by years and travel, gave way. Pages scattered in the wind like dying birds. "No!" Eleanor dropped to her knees, trying to gather the fragments. Proverbs mixed with psalms, her mother's careful notations smearing in the dirt. The other women laughed, but it was nervous laughter now. Even Ayanna looked uncertain, perhaps realizing she'd gone too far. "What happens here?" Tama's voice cut through the chaos. He took in the scene, Eleanor on her knees among scattered pages, Ayanna still holding the ruined cover, the other women backing away. His face darkened like a thundercloud. He spoke in rapid Comanche, words Eleanor had never heard him use. Ayanna tried to respond, but he cut her off with a gesture. Then, to Eleanor's amazement, Tama knelt beside her. He began gathering pages with the same care he'd used for sacred objects. Other warriors had gathered, and at a word from Tama, they too began collecting the scattered scripture. When they'd salvaged what they could, Tama helped Eleanor stand. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she wouldn't cry. Not in front of Ayanna. "Come," Tama said quietly. He led her to their lodge, carrying the gathered pages. Inside, Eleanor finally let the tears fall. "It was my mother's," she whispered. "She died when I was 12. It's all I had left of her." Tama set the pages down gently. Many were torn, dirty, some probably lost forever. The binding was destroyed. "I can't even read all the words," Eleanor continued, her voice breaking. "But holding it, seeing her writing in the margins, it made me feel less alone." Tama was quiet for a long moment. Then he rose, went to his own belongings, and withdrew something wrapped in soft hide. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small, beaded pouch. "This was my sister's," he said. "Her medicine bag. She made it the summer before." He swallowed. "I keep it to remember, to feel less alone." He placed it in Eleanor's hands. The beadwork was exquisite, tiny and perfect. It smelled faintly of sage and something sweet Eleanor couldn't identify. "I can't take this," Eleanor protested. "Not take, share. Your God, our spirits. Perhaps not so different. Both want us to remember love." Eleanor clutched the medicine bag, understanding the magnitude of his gesture. "Help me," she said suddenly. "Help me save what we can of the Bible. Maybe we can make something new." Together, they worked through the afternoon, sorting pages, cleaning what could be cleaned. Tama produced sinew and a bone needle, showing Eleanor how to bind the salvaged pages between pieces of soft hide. She decorated the cover with beadwork, creating a pattern that was neither fully Christian nor fully Comanche, but something unique. As they worked, Tama asked about the stories in the book. Eleanor found herself telling him about David and Goliath, about Ruth in the foreign land, about love that transcends tribes and nations. He listened intently, occasionally drawing parallels to Comanche stories. "You're Ruth," he said. "She was like you, stranger who became family. Where you go, I will go," Eleanor quoted softly. "Your people shall be my people." The words hung between them, taking on new meaning. That night, as they prepared for sleep, the space between their bedrolls seemed to mock Eleanor. The gift of the medicine bag, the gentle way he'd helped save her Bible, the understanding in his eyes, all of it had broken something open inside her. "Tama?" she called softly. He turned toward her in the dim firelight. "I'm cold," she said. It wasn't entirely a lie. The winter nights were bitter, But they both knew that wasn't really why she spoke. He hesitated. "Eleanor, please." Slowly, as if approaching a skittish deer. Tama moved his bedroll closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth, hear his breathing. "Is this proper?" he asked, and she almost laughed at the concern in his voice. They were married, had been for months, yet he still worried about her honor. "I don't care about proper anymore," Eleanor admitted. "I care about—" She struggled for words. "I care about you. Is that wrong?" Tama rolled onto his side, facing her. In the firelight, his eyes were deep as midnight. "I have cared about you since you stood between Nokoni and the buffalo. Foolish, brave woman." Eleanor's heart thundered. She reached out tentatively, her fingers finding his face. He closed his eyes at her touch, turning his cheek into her palm. "I'm frightened," she whispered. "Of me? Of feeling this much? Of wanting?" She couldn't finish. Tama caught her hand, pressed it to his chest, where his heart beat strong and fast. "I am frightened too. You are not what I expected to want." The confession broke the last wall between them. Tama pulled her close, and Eleanor went willingly, molding herself against him. His kiss, when it came, was nothing like she'd imagined, not rough or demanding, but achingly gentle, as if she were precious beyond measure. They kissed in the dying firelight, learning each other with tentative touches. Eleanor's hands found the scars she'd wondered about, tracing them with reverent fingers. Tama buried his face in her hair, breathing her in like a man starved for air. But when Eleanor's inexperienced hands moved to the ties of his shirt, Tama caught them gently. "No," he said softly. "Not like this." Eleanor felt heat flood her face. Had she misread? Did he not want— "Listen," Tama said, cupping her face. "You came here in sorrow. Forced. I see this shadow still in your eyes. When we—" he struggled for English words. "When we join, I want no shadows, no force, only choosing." Eleanor's eyes stung with tears of a different kind. "I choose you," she said fiercely. "I choose this life, these people. You, doesn't that count?" "It counts everything," Tama assured her. "But choosing in the heart and choosing in the body, these can be different. Your body still holds fear. I feel it when you tremble." He was right, even now, held safe in his arms. Eleanor felt echoes of terror at the thought of the marriage act. Her mother's whispered warnings, the crude jokes she'd overheard from soldiers, her own virgin fears, all of it tangled inside her. "Then what do we do?" she asked. "We wait," Tama said simply. "We learn each other, and when you tremble from wanting, not from fear, then we will know." He kissed her again, slow and deep, showing her without words that waiting didn't mean distance. They slept entwined that night, Eleanor's head on his chest, his arms protective around her. It was intimate beyond anything she'd imagined, yet somehow perfect in its restraint. The next days passed in a sweet tension. They touched constantly now, small touches, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing as they worked. At night they kissed until Eleanor felt drunk with it, but Tama always pulled back before things went too far, reading her body's signals better than she did herself. The camp noticed the change. Some of the women smiled knowingly. Even Ayana, chastened by Tama's anger, offered a grudging respect. Grandmother cackled with delight when she caught them holding hands. "About time," she said in her broken English. "Stupid children, taking so long." One afternoon, as Eleanor helped prepare hides for trade, Nokoni's wife, Hupi, sat beside her. The woman rarely spoke to Eleanor, though her hostility had faded since the buffalo incident. "You love him," Hupi said. Not a question. Eleanor's hand stilled on the hide. "Yes." "Good. He has been alone too long. But you understand, to love a warrior is to love fear. Every hunt, every raid, every time he rides out. You will wonder if he returns." Eleanor thought of her father, safe in his little church, his greatest danger a disagreement over scripture. Then she thought of Tama, fierce and free, risking everything to feed and protect his people. "I understand," she said. Hoopy studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you are truly one of us." That night, a celebration was called. A successful raid on an enemy tribe had brought horses and honor to several young warriors. The drums beat, fires blazed high, and the people danced. Eleanor watched from the sidelines until Tama pulled her up. "Dance," he commanded with a grin. "I don't know how." "Then learn." He showed her the steps, nothing like the sedate waltzes she'd glimpsed at fort gatherings. This was wild, primal, a dance that celebrated life in all its fierce joy. Eleanor stumbled at first, then found the rhythm. She danced until her breath came short and her skin gleamed with sweat. When the music slowed, Tama pulled her close. They swayed together, lost in each other while the camp celebrated around them. "Eleanor," he said against her ear, "my Suvada, do you know what you've done to me?" "Tell me," she breathed. "You've made me whole. I was half dead with hate. You brought me back to life." Eleanor pulled back to see his face. In the firelight, his eyes held something that made her knees weak. Not just desire, though that was there, but love, deep and true and overwhelming. "Take me to our lodge," she said. "Eleanor, no more waiting, no more fear. I want to be your wife in truth. Please, Tama, I'm ready." He searched her face for a long moment, then took her hand and led her away from the celebration. In their lodge, with the sound of drums still echoing outside, Eleanor stood before the man she'd learned to love and let her dress fall away. Tama's intake of breath was sharp, reverent. He came to her slowly, his hands trembling as they mapped her skin. When he kissed her this time, there was promise in it, promise and possession and benediction all at once. "Are you certain?" he asked one last time. Eleanor answered by pulling him down to the buffalo robes, ready at last to cross the final distance between them. Outside, the celebration continued, but inside their lodge, a private celebration began. Two souls joining in the ancient dance, choosing each other over and over with every touch, every sigh, every whispered word of love. When dawn came, painting their lodge walls rose and gold, Eleanor lay in Tama's arms, forever changed. Not just in body, though her body sang with new knowledge, but in soul. She was no longer Eleanor Whitlow, the Reverend's daughter. She was Suvada, Swift, wife of Tama, woman of the Comanche, and she was home. The messenger arrived at dawn, his horse lathered with sweat and foam. Eleanor was grinding corn outside the lodge when the commotion started, warriors gathering, voices raised in anger and disbelief. She understood enough Comanche now to catch fragments. "White settlers. Dead. Reverend." The grinding stone slipped from her numb fingers. Tama found her moments later, still kneeling by the scattered corn. His face was grave as he crouched beside her. "Your father," he said quietly in English. "There was trouble at the settlement. Some of our young warriors, not from this band, raided for horses. The settlers formed a mob. They blamed your father for the peace treaty failing." "Is he—" Eleanor couldn't finish the question. "Dead." Tama's hand covered hers. "The messenger says they hung him from his own church rafters, called him a traitor for giving his daughter to savages." The world tilted. Eleanor felt Tama's arms around her, heard voices speaking, but everything seemed distant and unreal. Her father, weak, well-meaning Samuel Whitlow, murdered by his own congregation. The people he'd served, married, baptized, they'd killed him for trying to make peace. She didn't remember being carried to the lodge. When awareness returned, she was lying on the buffalo robes, Tama holding her while she sobbed. Not the delicate tears of a lady, but raw, ugly grief that tore from her chest in waves. "My fault," she gasped between sobs. "If I hadn't agreed, if I'd refused." "Then more would have died in the raids." Tama said firmly, "Your father knew the cost of peace. He chose it anyway. They killed him for loving me enough to let me go." The irony was bitter as wormwood. "And I hated him for it. The last words I spoke to him were cold, distant. I never told him I understood. Never said goodbye properly. Tama held her through the storm of grief, his own eyes reflecting remembered pain. He knew this loss, had felt it when his sister died. When the worst of the sobbing passed, he brought her water, made her drink. What of burial? He asked gently. Your people have customs. Eleanor laughed bitterly. My people? The ones who murdered him? No, he has no people there now. She sat up, wiping her face. Could we? Is it possible to bring him here? To bury him where he's not hated? Tama was quiet for a moment. It is unusual, but these are unusual times. I will speak to the council. The debate was fierce. Some argued that bringing a white man's body to their sacred grounds would invite bad medicine. Others, including Nokoni, still grateful for Eleanor's courage with the buffalo, argued that the man had died for peace and deserved honor. Finally, Chief Quana himself spoke. This woman is Comanche now. Her grief is our grief. Her father died because he believed in the peace between our peoples. We will honor that sacrifice. A party of warriors rode out the next morning. Eleanor wanted to go, but Tama gently refused. The settlement is dangerous for you now. They might try to take you back, or worse. 3 days later, they returned with a wrapped bundle. Eleanor didn't ask what they'd found, what state the body was in. She was grateful simply to have something to bury. The funeral was a strange blend of traditions. Eleanor read from her restored Bible, the one she and Tama had sewn together with hide and sinew. The warriors who'd retrieved the body sang an honor song, usually reserved for fallen warriors. Grandmother, ancient and bent, scattered sage and spoke words in Comanche about the spirit's journey, as they lowered Samuel Whitlow into the earth of Comanche territory. Eleanor felt something break and reshape inside her. The last tie to her old life was severing, but instead of feeling lost, she felt free. Free to choose her own path without the weight of others' expectations. I forgive you, Papa, she whispered as the first handful of dirt hit the wrapped form. And I hope you forgive me for finding happiness where you never thought I would. That night, Tama held her close in their lodge. They didn't make love. Grief had exhausted her. But his presence was comfort enough. When she woke in the deep of night, she found him watching her. What is it? She asked. I wonder if you will leave now, he said quietly. With your father gone, the treaty broken, you're not bound to stay. Eleanor sat up, incredulous. Leave? Where would I go? Those people murdered my father for the crime of loving me. This is my home now. You are my home. Relief flickered across his features before he could hide it. Even knowing the danger, the raids will increase now. The army will come. This peace we've lived in, it's ending. Then we'll face whatever comes. Together. She touched his face. I chose you, remember? Not for peace treaties or to save lives. I chose you because I love you. Because I can't imagine my life without you now. He kissed her then, desperate and claiming, as if trying to brand her words into truth through touch alone. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor threw herself into camp life with new determination. She was truly Comanche now, not playing at it, not trying to fit in, but embracing it fully. She learned to shoot Tama's bow, though her aim was laughable. She perfected her hide work until even critical Ayanna admitted her skill. She helped treat wounds when raiders returned bloodied from skirmishes. The violence was escalating on both sides. The army had increased patrols. Comanche bands retaliated for broken treaties and murdered kin. The brief peace that had allowed Eleanor and Tama to find each other was crumbling like dried clay. One hot summer evening, as Eleanor helped prepare a young warrior's body for burial. He'd been shot by soldiers while hunting, not even raiding. She made a decision. Teach me to fight, she told Tama that night. He looked up from fletching arrows. What? Fight, defend myself, kill if necessary. Her voice was steady, resolved. I won't be helpless if the soldiers come. I won't be taken alive back to their world. Eleanor. Suvada, she corrected firmly. That girl Eleanor died with her father. I'm Suvada now, and I will fight for my people. Tama studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Tomorrow we begin. The training was brutal. Tama didn't coddle her, didn't treat her as fragile. He taught her to use a knife, where to strike for quick death, how to fight dirty, eyes, throat, groin, how to use her smaller size as advantage rather than weakness. Eleanor's body changed, grew harder and leaner. Her hands, once suited only for embroidery, could now grip a weapon steady. She learned to move silently, to read sign, to think like a warrior. The other women watched with mixtures of admiration and concern. This wasn't typical, even for Comanche women who were far from helpless. But these weren't typical times. One morning, as Eleanor practiced with her knife against a hide target, grandmother approached. The ancient woman moved slowly these days, her strength fading like smoke. "You prepare for war," the old woman said in Comanche. "I prepare to survive," Eleanor replied. "Same thing, these days." Grandmother was quiet for a moment. "You carry new life. You know this?" Eleanor's hand froze mid-strike. "What?" "The way you move, the sickness in mornings you try to hide, new life grows." The old woman's clouded eyes seemed to see straight through her. "What will you do now? Warrior woman with child in belly." Eleanor sank to the ground, hand moving instinctively to her stomach. A child. Tama's child. She'd suspected for days but pushed the thought away, unable to face it with so much uncertainty around them. "I don't know," she admitted. "You must tell him. A man deserves to know he will be father before he rides to war." That night, Eleanor waited until she and Tama were alone in their lodge. He was cleaning his rifle, a weapon taken in trade, necessary for fighting soldiers equally armed. "I have something to tell you," she began. He looked up, alert to her serious tone. "I'm carrying your child." The rifle slipped from his hands. For a moment, Tama looked poleaxed, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Then joy transformed his features, followed quickly by fear. "A child, now, when everything—" He pulled her close, his hand splaying protectively over her still flat stomach. "I should send you away, somewhere safe." "No," Eleanor's voice was iron. "We stay together, always. Promise me. Tama, whatever comes, we face it together." He was quiet for so long she feared he would refuse. Then, "Together," he agreed. "But you must promise too, if I fall. You take our child and run. Find safety. Live. Don't talk of falling. Promise me, Suvada." Eleanor closed her eyes, hating the words. "I promise, but you must promise to fight to come back to us. Always, always." He swore. They made love that night with desperate tenderness, aware of how fragile their happiness was. Outside, a wolf howled at the moon, a lonely sound that seemed to echo the uncertainty of their future. In her womb, new life grew, part white, part Comanche, belonging fully to neither world but loved beyond measure. Eleanor fell asleep with Tama's hand protective over their unborn child, his whispered prayers in Comanche blessing them both. War was coming. The fragile peace was shattered. But tonight, in their buffalo hide lodge with the stars watching through the smoke hole, they had each other. They had love. They had hope. It would have to be enough. The attack came at dawn. As attacks always do when men mean to kill rather than fight, Eleanor woke to gunfire and screaming. Tama already reaching for his weapons. Through the lodge walls, shadows danced in firelight. Someone had set the outer shelters ablaze. "Stay down," Tama commanded. But Eleanor was already reaching for her knife, the one he'd taught her to use, her belly, now rounded with 6 months of pregnancy, made movement awkward, but fear lent her speed. The camp erupted into chaos. Blue-coated soldiers poured in from the east, while warriors scrambled to mount defense. Women grabbed children, fleeing toward the ravine. The elderly who couldn't run prepared to die where they sat. Tama kissed Eleanor hard. "Quick! The ravine! Go! Not without you!" A bullet tore through the lodge wall, showering them with splinters. Tama shoved Eleanor toward the entrance. "Go! Protect our child!" She ran, hating herself for it. dodging between lodges as bullets whined overhead. A soldier loomed from smoke, rifle raised. Eleanor didn't think. Her knife found his throat before he could fire. Blood sprayed hot across her hands. She grabbed his pistol and kept running. At the ravine, women and children huddled in terror. Eleanor helped Hoopy organize them deeper into the narrow canyon, away from rifle fire. Behind them, the sounds of battle raged, war cries and gunshots, the screaming of horses and dying men. "Where's grandmother?" Eleanor asked suddenly. Hoopy's face crumpled. "She wouldn't come. Said she was too old to run anymore." Eleanor's heart clenched, but there was no time for grief. A group of soldiers appeared at the ravine's edge, rifles aimed down at the helpless. "Let me pass," Eleanor shouted in English. "I'm white. I'm a captive." The soldiers hesitated, seeing her pale skin, her blonde hair. One lowered his rifle slightly. "Ma'am, are you Eleanor Whitlow?" She recognized him, Private Collins from Fort Richardson. He'd courted her briefly before her marriage, bringing wildflowers and stammering compliments. "Yes," she said, moving carefully up the slope. "These women and children aren't fighters. Please, James, let them go." Collins looked uncertain. "Orders are to. Captain says no survivors. Says they're all hostiles after what happened at Brady Creek." "Children?" Eleanor's voice rose. "Babies? You'd murder babies for Brady Creek?" "Ma'am, you don't understand. After your father died, after you were taken, the raids got worse. 30 settlers dead in 2 months. The captain, he says—" "I wasn't taken," Eleanor interrupted. "I chose this. I chose my husband. And these people are my family now." Collins stared at her swollen belly, understanding dawning. "You, with a savage? My God, Eleanor, what have they done to you?" Behind him, other soldiers were growing impatient. One raised his rifle toward the huddled children. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She shot him with a stolen pistol. The man tumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. "Run!" Eleanor screamed in Comanche. The women scattered deeper into the ravine as soldiers opened fire. Collins grabbed Eleanor's wrist. "You're coming with us. The captain will want—" Eleanor slashed with her knife, opening his hand to the bone. As he reeled back, she ran along the ravine's edge, drawing fire away from the fleeing women and children. Bullets chipped rock around her. Her pregnancy made her clumsy, slow. A soldier tackled her from behind. They went down hard, Eleanor protecting her belly instinctively. The soldier, young, probably no more than 18, raised his rifle butt to strike. Eleanor grabbed a rock and smashed it into his temple. He slumped, unconscious or dead. She struggled to her feet, side aching, tasting blood where she'd bitten her tongue. The main battle was moving toward them now, warriors falling back under disciplined rifle volleys. She saw Nokoni go down, chest blooming red. Saw young Kiani, barely 14, trying to drag his father's body to safety. Then she saw Tama. He fought like something from legend, bow singing death until arrows ran out, then knife and war club against rifles and sabers. Bodies lay around him, both blue and brown, but he was bleeding from multiple wounds, slowing, surrounded. "No," Eleanor breathed. She ran toward him, no thought but reaching him. A mounted soldier wheeled to cut her down. Ayanna appeared from nowhere, leaping onto the horse's back, dragging the soldier from his saddle. The two women's eyes met for an instant. Understanding, forgiveness, sisterhood. Before Ayanna shoved Eleanor onward, Eleanor reached Tama as he fell to one knee. Saber slash across his ribs, painting him crimson. She put herself between him and the advancing soldiers, knife in one hand, pistol in the other. "Stop!" she screamed. "I'm Eleanor Whitlow, daughter of Reverend Samuel Whitlow. This man is my husband by law and God. You have no right." "God?" The officer pushed through the ranks, and Eleanor's heart sank. Captain Marcus Hayworth, known across the frontier for his brutal efficiency. "You speak of God while defending these heathens, while carrying one's mongrel brat? They're people," Eleanor said desperately. "With families, with honor. They're animals." Hayworth cut her off. "And you're worse, a white woman who chose to rut with them. but you're still white, so I'll give you one chance. Come with us now. We'll say you were forced, maddened by captivity. The child died in birth. You can have your life back." Eleanor felt Tama's hand weakly grasp her ankle. "He was losing too much blood." "Never," she said. Hayworth shrugged. "Then you'll watch him die slowly before we take you anyway." The captain raised his pistol toward Tama. Eleanor moved without thinking, throwing her knife. It took Hayworth in the shoulder, spinning him around. In the moment of chaos, Eleanor heard something beautiful, war cries from the ridge. Chief Quanah had arrived with reinforcements from another band. The tide turned. Soldiers, thinking they'd trapped a small camp, found themselves outnumbered. The retreat was called. Men in blue fled toward their horses, leaving their wounded, but the damage was done. The camp burned. Bodies littered the ground. And Tama... Eleanor dropped beside him, pressing her hands to the worst of his wounds. So much blood. Too much. "Stupid woman," he whispered. "Should have run." "Never," Eleanor said fiercely. "Not without you. You promised together always." His hand found her belly. "Take care." "No, no. You'll take care of our child yourself. Do you hear me? Tama Redhawk, you will not die. I forbid it." Warriors were gathering. Quanah himself kneeling beside them. The chief looked grave. "The wounds are bad. Then we heal them." Eleanor snapped. She turned to the watching people. "Get me needle and sinew, boiling water, all the medicine plants grandmother taught about, now." For 3 days, Eleanor fought death for her husband's life. She sewed wounds with tiny stitches her mother had taught for fine embroidery. She packed injuries with healing herbs, forced willow bark tea between Tama's lips for fever. When infection set in, she cut away proud flesh without flinching. Hoopy helped, and even Ayanna, sporting her own battle wounds. The woman who'd tormented Eleanor now worked beside her, grinding medicines, changing poultices. "Why?" Eleanor asked during one long night. Ayanna was quiet for a moment. "You fought for us, killed your own people for our children. You're not white anymore. You're Comanche." On the 4th day, Tama's fever broke. His eyes opened, focused on Eleanor's exhausted face. "Still here," he murmured. "Where else would I be?" Eleanor touched his face gently. "We have a problem. Husband, the army knows I'm alive, that I chose to stay. They'll come again. Then we go deeper into Llano Estacado, where soldiers fear to follow. Can you travel? For you and our child? I can do anything." But Eleanor knew the truth. The army wouldn't stop. Her public defiance, her shooting of soldiers, marked her as traitor. They'd hunt her specifically now, symbol of white womanhood corrupted. 2 weeks later, as Tama grew stronger, Eleanor made a decision. She found Quanah after the evening council. "I need to go to them," she said without preamble. "To the fort, to speak for peace." The chief's face was stone. "They will not listen. You are not white to them now." "Maybe not, but I have to try. The alternative is more death, more children like..." She thought of little Paki, Nokoni's son, orphaned in the attack. "Let me try, as speaker for the band. And if they keep you, kill you." Eleanor touched her belly. "Then at least I tried. This child deserves a chance at life without constant war." Quanah was silent for a long time. Then, "You have courage like a warrior, like your husband. Very well, but you do not go alone. You go with my protection, my words." When Eleanor told Tama, he raged, still weak. He tried to rise, to forbid her. She calmed him with touches and quiet words. "Trust me," she said. "As I trusted you once, let me fight for us in my way." He stared at her for a long time. "If you don't return, I will return. I swear it. We have a child to raise, remember? I intend to see him become a great warrior like his father." "Or her," Tama said softly. "A great woman like her mother." Eleanor kissed him, pouring all her love into the contact. Then she rose, dressed in a mixture of Comanche and white clothing. showing both worlds she belonged to now, and prepared to ride into the mouth of the lion, for her family, for peace, for the future growing beneath her heart. The sunrise painted the world in blood and gold as Eleanor rode out, 6 warriors as honor guard, behind them. The camp prepared to move deeper into the wild lands, away from soldiers' reach. Ahead lay Fort Richardson, where she'd either find a path to peace or die trying. The gates of Fort Richardson loomed before Eleanor like the mouth of a beast. The 6 Comanche warriors who'd escorted her sat their horses at a careful distance, hands near weapons but not touching them. They would wait 3 days. If she didn't return, they would know she was dead or captive, and carry word back to Tama. "Halt!" A sentry's voice cracked with youth and nervousness. "State your good God." "Is that Eleanor Whitlow?" Eleanor sat straighter on her paint mare, one hand protective over her swollen belly. "I am Eleanor Redhawk, wife of Tama of the Quahati band. I come as peace speaker, carrying words from Chief Quanah Parker to your commander." The sentry gaped, his rifle wavering. Within minutes, the gates erupted with activity. Soldiers poured out, rifles trained on the Comanche escort. An officer, Major Brennan. Eleanor recognized him from church socials a lifetime ago, approached carefully. "Miss Whitlow?" "Mrs. Redhawk," Eleanor corrected firmly. Brennan's face twisted with disgust as his eyes traveled to her belly. "You'll come with us. Your escorts will leave immediately. They wait for me. 3 days. This is agreed." Eleanor dismounted carefully, back aching from the ride. "I come under flag of truce, Major, as peace speaker. You know the rules of parley." "Rules? You dare speak of rules after fighting against your own people, after shooting Private Morrison, after defending children from massacre?" Eleanor shot back. "Now, will you honor the truce, or shall I tell Chief Quanah that the Army's word means nothing?" Brennan's jaw worked furiously. "But military protocol 1. Your savage friends stay outside. You'll come with me." The fort was as Eleanor remembered. Neat buildings around a dusty parade ground, American flags snapping in the hot wind, but the looks that followed her were poison. Women she'd known from church gatherings spat in the dust. Men cursed under their breath. "Squaw," someone muttered. "Traitor. Whore." Eleanor kept her head high, one hand on her belly where her child kicked restlessly. Major Brennan led her not to the commander's office, but to a small, windowless room. A cell, though they didn't call it that. "Wait here," he said curtly. "I require water and food. Unless the Army now starves pregnant women." He left without answering, but a pitcher appeared shortly after. Eleanor drank gratefully, then settled to wait. The baby moved constantly, as if sensing her tension. Hours passed before the door opened again. Colonel James Davidson entered, older than Eleanor remembered. Hair gone gray, face carved with harsh lines. Behind him, Captain Hayworth, arm still in a sling from her knife. "Eleanor Whitlow," Davidson began. "Eleanor Redhawk," she corrected again. Davidson's face darkened. "You are not married. No Christian minister performed the ceremony. What you have is an abomination, not a marriage. Then I suppose Mary and Joseph weren't married either. Since no Christian minister existed then," Eleanor replied coolly. "I took vows. I honor them." Hayworth laughed harshly. "Listen to her, Colonel. Completely mad. The savages have corrupted her utterly. I'm quite sane, Captain. Sane enough to try preventing more bloodshed. Will you hear Chief Quanah's words or not?" Davidson studied her for a long moment. "Speak." Eleanor drew herself up. "Chief Quanah Parker offers this. The Quahati will withdraw deeper into Llano Estacado, beyond the current settlements. No raids on white towns or farms that respect the boundary. In exchange, the Army stops attacking winter camps, stops slaughtering women and children." "Unacceptable," Hayworth snapped. "They're savages. They all need to be on reservations or dead. Reservations where they starve, where disease kills more than bullets." Eleanor's voice rose. "Where children forget their names and heritage? Better than murdering white settlers. Davidson said. And who murdered whom first? Eleanor challenged. Who broke every treaty made? Who shot children at Sand Creek? Who? Hayworth backhanded her. Eleanor tasted blood, saw stars. Her baby kicked frantically. Captain, Davidson barked. She's under truce. She's a traitor. Hayworth snarled. She should hang. Would have already if she wasn't carrying a white baby. Eleanor spat blood onto the floor. This baby is Comanche, and proud of it. The room erupted. Hayworth reached for his pistol. Davidson restrained him. Soldiers burst in at the noise, in the chaos. Eleanor saw her chance. I invoke the old law, she shouted. The right of any citizen to appeal directly to the territorial governor. You cannot hold or harm me without his word. Davidson froze. It was an old statute, rarely used, but still legal. To ignore it would bring civilian oversight the military despised. The governor is in Austin, Davidson said finally. 5 days' ride. Then send your fastest rider. I'll wait. Eleanor smiled grimly. Unless you want word to reach the newspapers that the Army imprisons pregnant peace envoys. They locked her in the quartermaster's storage room, larger than the first cell. With a cot and chamber pot, Eleanor sank onto the thin mattress, exhausted. Her face throbbed where Hayworth struck her. That night, through the thin walls, she heard soldiers talking. Plans to attack despite any truce. Locations of Comanche camps scouted. Her blood ran cold. They meant to use her absence to strike while Tama and the others felt safe. Eleanor waited until deep night, then used skills Tama had taught her. The door lock was simple, meant for supplies, not prisoners. She slipped out into darkness. The fort slept except for sentries. Eleanor ghosted between buildings. Pregnancy making her clumsy, but desperation lending stealth. At the telegraph office, she broke the window with her elbow wrapped in torn petticoat. She'd learned telegraph code from her father, who'd been fascinated by the technology. Now she tapped out a message to Austin, to the governor, to the newspaper office, warning of the planned attacks, pleading for intervention, signing with her full name so they'd know it was real. Stop right there. Eleanor turned to find Private Collins, hand bandaged from her knife, pistol aimed at her chest. James, she said softly. Please. You cut me, he said, voice shaking. I courted you proper, brought you flowers, and you chose them over your own kind. I chose love over hate. Eleanor said simply, Is that so wrong? You're carrying a savage brat. I'm carrying a child, innocent of any crime. She stepped closer, ignoring the pistol. James, you're a good man. Don't let them make you a child killer. His hand shook. Get back in your cell. I'll say I found the window broken. Animal, maybe. Thank you, Eleanor breathed. Don't thank me. Tomorrow they'll likely hang you anyway. Treaty or no treaty, Hayworth's got the colonel convinced you're too dangerous to live. Eleanor's blood chilled, but she kept her voice steady. Then at least the warning went out. Back in her cell, she prepared for death. Said prayers for Tama, for their unborn child, for the people she'd come to love. When dawn came, she was ready. But instead of soldiers, a commotion in the courtyard, horses arriving at speed. Eleanor peered through her small window to see a sight that made her heart leap. Texas Rangers, led by Captain Samuel Walker himself. She knew Walker by reputation, fair-minded, tough as leather. One of the few Rangers who'd ever dealt honestly with the Comanche. More importantly, he answered to civilian authority, not military. Within an hour, Eleanor was brought before a gathering in the commander's office. Walker stood like a wall between her and Hayworth, who looked murderous. Ma'am, Walker tipped his hat. Got your telegraph. Also got orders from the governor. You're to be released immediate-like. This is military business. Davidson protested. Not anymore. Walker replied. Governor's calling a peace council. Wants Mrs. Red Hawk there to translate and mediate. Mrs. Red Hawk? Hayworth spat. She's no more married than... Common law recognizes marriage by mutual consent and cohabitation. Walker interrupted. Has since the Republic days, unless you want to tell half the frontier their marriages ain't legal? Eleanor could have kissed the man. When is this council? 2 weeks hence, at Butterfield Station. Neutral ground. Chief Quanah's already agreed if you're there. Walker's eyes were kind but shrewd. You up for it, ma'am? In your condition? Eleanor touched her belly. 2 weeks. She'd be near 8 months by then. But for peace, for a chance at a future, I'll be there. She promised. They released her within the hour. Her Comanche escort whooped with joy when she emerged, surrounding her with protective fury as they rode away. Eleanor looked back once at the fort. Hayworth stood on the wall, watching, even at distance. She could feel his hate. This wasn't over. Men like him wouldn't accept peace easily. But she was alive. The warning had gone out, and somewhere in Llano Estacado, Tama waited for her return. Home, she told her escort in Comanche. Take me home. They rode hard, pushing the horses. Eleanor gritted her teeth against the discomfort, her child protesting the pace. But she had to reach Tama, had to tell him about the council, the chance for real peace. 3 days later, they created a rise to see the camp spread below. Eleanor's heart soared. Made it. Safe. Then she saw the funeral scaffolds. 3 of them. New. Her joy turned to ash as she kicked her tired horse to a gallop, racing down toward whatever fresh grief awaited. The camp received her with subdued happiness. She was alive, returned, but death had visited while she was gone. Grandmother was one of the scaffolds. Eleanor had expected that. The old woman had been failing, but the small scaffold, the one that made her heart break, that was Paki, Nokoni's orphaned son. The boy had taken fever and died within a day. Where's Tama? Eleanor asked Hoopy, fear clawing at her throat. Alive, but... Hoopy led her to their lodge. Tama lay on buffalo robes, skin gray with pain. His wounds from the battle, the ones Eleanor had worked so hard to heal, had reopened during a hunt. Infection had set in again. You fool, Eleanor breathed, dropping beside him. You absolute fool. You were supposed to rest. His eyes opened, focused with effort. Suvada, you came back. Of course I came back. She was already checking wounds, calling for medicines. And you're going to live. Do you hear me? We have a peace council in 2 weeks. Our child needs a father. You don't get to die. He smiled weakly. Bossy woman. You're bossy woman, Eleanor corrected, blinking back tears. Forever, remember? As she worked to save him again. The baby kicked strong inside her, life persisting despite death, hope surviving against hate. The peace council would come. Men like Hayworth would try to destroy it. But here, now, in this lodge on the endless plains, love continued its quiet rebellion against a world determined to tear them apart. Eleanor sang softly as she worked, a Comanche lullaby grandmother had taught her, mixed with hymns from her childhood. 2 worlds, 2 songs, becoming one, just like the child growing beneath her heart. The settlement at Butterfield Station sprawled like a promise across the prairie, neither fully white nor Comanche, but something new. Eleanor walked among the newly built structures, her belly heavy with child, watching children of both races chase each other through dusty streets while their parents worked side by side. 2 years had passed since the peace council that changed everything. 2 years since she'd stood, 8 months pregnant, translating between Chief Quanah and Governor Edmund Davis while Tama recovered from his wounds. 2 years since the treaty that created this experimental community where former enemies learned to live as neighbors. Mama, Mama, look! Eleanor turned to see her daughter, Sarah Windsong Redhawk, Sapua in Comanche, toddling toward her on chubby legs. At 18 months, she was a perfect blend of her parents, Tama's dark eyes and strong features, Eleanor's fair skin and stubborn chin. She clutched a wooden horse Nokoni had carved for her, waving it proudly. Beautiful, little one, Eleanor said in Comanche, then repeated in English, They were raising her in both languages, both worlds. Tama appeared from the schoolhouse they'd helped build, sawdust in his hair. He'd taken to carpentry with the same intensity he'd once brought to warfare, creating desks where children learned letters and numbers together. "She escaped from Hopi again," he said, scooping up their daughter, who shrieked with delight. "Sop was getting too clever for any of us." Eleanor laughed, then winced as the new baby kicked hard against her ribs. This pregnancy was different from the first. Calmer, without the constant fear of attack. A peace baby, grandmother would have called it, had she lived to see this day. They walked together toward the center of town where preparations were underway. Tomorrow marked the 2nd anniversary of the treaty, and people were coming from across the territory to see if the experiment had truly worked. It hadn't been easy. Those first months, fights broke out daily. White settlers who'd lost family to raids couldn't forgive. Comanche warriors who'd seen their people slaughtered struggled with farming instead of hunting. But gradually, painfully, they'd found common ground. The school helped. Eleanor taught there 3 days a week, Comanche women the other days. Children learned both cultures, both languages. The young ones adapted fastest, playing together without the weight of their parents' history. The shared work helped too. When drought threatened crops, everyone hauled water together. When raiders, both white outlaws and renegade Indians who rejected the peace, attacked, the settlement defended itself as one. Nothing bonded people like standing shoulder to shoulder against common threats. "Eleanor, there you are," Margaret Harrison bustled over. A white woman who'd lost her husband to Comanche raiders 5 years ago. She'd arrived at the settlement full of hate, demanding Eleanor be cast out. Now she helped run the medical clinic Eleanor had established, mixing frontier remedies with Comanche medicine ways. "Doc Brennan's arrived from Fort Worth," Margaret said. "Wants to talk to you about that medical manual you're writing." Eleanor had been documenting the combining of healing traditions. How willow bark tea worked as well as manufactured aspirin. How certain poultices prevented infection better than carbolic acid. Knowledge that could save lives across the frontier. "I'll see him after—" Eleanor stopped, pressing a hand to her belly. The baby had dropped lower, pressure increasing. Not yet, she thought. Too much to do. That evening, the settlement gathered for a feast. Buffalo meat and beef side by side. Corn prepared in Comanche style next to sourdough bread. Eleanor sat with Tama, watching their daughter play with other children, white, Comanche, Mexican, and mixed like herself. "My parents would be horrified," said James Collins from beside them. He'd left the army after the peace treaty, sickened by the massacres he'd witnessed. Now he served as the settlement's sheriff, keeping peace between peoples who'd once sworn to destroy each other. Their precious son, dining with savages. "Good thing there are no savages here," Tama replied dryly. "Only neighbors." Collins laughed. The sound still surprised. "Indeed. Only neighbors." Captain Walker attended, graying now but still tough as leather. He pulled Eleanor aside as the dancing began, fiddles mixing with drums and music that belonged to no single tradition. "There's news from Austin," he said quietly. "Not all good." Eleanor's heart sank. "Tell me." "General Sherman's pushing to end the experiment. Says it's unnatural, against God's plan. He's got support from some newspapers, especially after—" He hesitated. "After what? There've been other mixed marriages, 3 in the last month. White women choosing Comanche men, white men taking Comanche wives. The preachers are calling it an abomination." Eleanor thought of her own marriage, the love that had grown from such unlikely seeds. And the governor, standing firm for now, but elections come next year. If someone running on ending the settlement wins. Eleanor touched her belly where the new baby turned restlessly. A son this time? She was certain. What world would he inherit? "We'll face it when it comes," she said. "We've survived worse." The celebration continued late into the night. Eleanor danced carefully with Tama, their daughter on his shoulders, laughing at the stars. For a moment, the world was perfect. The pain started near dawn. Eleanor woke with her waters broken, contractions already strong. This baby was coming fast, as if eager to enter the world they'd built. "Tama," she gasped. He was alert instantly. Calling for Hoopie and Margaret, the midwives came running, another bridge built, white and Comanche women working together to bring new life safely into the world. The labor was intense, but swift, as the sun painted the eastern sky crimson and gold. Eleanor heard her son's first cry, strong and fierce, a warrior's announcement of arrival. "A boy," Hoopie announced, cleaning the baby with practiced hands. Perfect, loud, like his father. Tama held his son with the same wonder he'd shown with Sapua, tears unashamed on his face. What shall we call him? Eleanor thought of all they'd overcome, all they'd built. "Samuel," she said, "Samuel Tatanka Redhawk, for my father and yours." Tama's father had died defending the band years before, a warrior named Buffalo Bull, Tatanka in Comanche. "Samuel Tatanka," Tama repeated, "bridging worlds, like his sister." As if summoned by her name, Sapua toddled in, Ayana, now one of Eleanor's closest friends, guiding her. The little girl peered at her brother with serious dark eyes, then gently patted his head. "Baby," she announced in both languages. "My baby." The adults laughed, tension breaking. Outside, the settlement stirred to life. Hammers ringing, children calling, the daily miracle of former enemies building something new together. Eleanor nursed her son, surrounded by family chosen and born. Thinking of the journey that brought them here, the fear and force of that first night in Tama's tent seemed a lifetime ago. Now she couldn't imagine any other life. "You're thinking deep thoughts," Tama observed, settling beside her with Sapua in his lap. "I'm thinking we need to expand the school," Eleanor said, "and the clinic, and maybe start that trading post Marcus Stands Tall suggested. If this place is going to survive political pressure, it needs to be too valuable to destroy. Always planning," Tama said fondly. "What happened to my swift little bird who only knew how to run? She learned to build instead," Eleanor replied, with help from a certain stubborn warrior who taught her to be strong. They sat in comfortable silence, their children between them, listening to their community wake outside. Somewhere a rooster crowed, brought by German immigrants who joined the settlement. A Comanche morning song rose in answer. English and Spanish and Comanche voices mingled like streams joining a river. It wasn't perfect. There were still fights, still prejudices, still those outside who wanted them to fail. But it was real. It was theirs. And it was growing. "Eleanor," Tama said suddenly, "do you remember what you told me that night in the canyon, when we sheltered from the storm?" She smiled, remembering her desperate words as she'd huddled against him for warmth. "That I was tired of death and wanted to see life win for once?" "Life won," he said simply, gesturing at their children, their home, their impossible community. "We won." Eleanor leaned against her husband, their daughter playing with her brother's tiny fingers, and felt the truth of it in her bones. They had won, not through force or treaties or politics, but through the daily choice to see each other as human, to build instead of burn, to love instead of hate. Outside, thunder rumbled across the prairie. Not the thunder of guns or warfare, but the promise of rain for crops planted by hands that had once held only weapons. In the schoolhouse, children's voices rose in song, a Comanche lullaby Eleanor had taught them, words of peace and plenty. The world might not be ready for what they'd built, forces might gather to tear it down, but here, now, in this moment, love had conquered fear, understanding had defeated prejudice, and two peoples who'd been told they were natural enemies had discovered they could be neighbors, friends, family. "Mama, story?" Sapua asked, looking up with her father's eyes and her mother's smile. "What story would you like, little one?" "About the bird, swift bird." Eleanor laughed, gathering her daughter close while Tama held their son. "Once," she began in both languages, "there was a small swift bird who got lost in a terrible storm. She was very frightened and very alone. As she told the story, her story, their story, transformed into something their children could understand. The sun climbed higher over the settlement at Butterfield Station. Smoke rose from cook fires. Hammers rang. Lives intertwined in patterns no one could have imagined when a frightened preacher's daughter first rode away from everything she'd known. The swift bird had indeed found her home, and in finding it, had helped others find theirs too. In the distance, an eagle cried, sacred to both peoples, blessing what they'd built with its wild, free song. Eleanor finished her story, kissed both her children, and met Tama's eyes over their heads. "Forever?" he asked softly, echoing promises made in harder times. "Forever," she confirmed, meaning it with every fiber of her being. The future stretched before them, uncertain but no longer fearsome. Whatever came, they would face it together. Comanche and white, warrior and peacemaker, all the peoples who'd chosen to write a new story on the vast canvas of the prairie. And at the heart of it, a love that had grown from the most unlikely ground, proving that sometimes the greatest victories came not from conquest, but from the courage to see an enemy's humanity, and in seeing it, to discover an unexpected friend. The swift bird was home, and she had taught others to fly. Thank you for listening to this story from the Wild West. Where are you listening from? Please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Eleanor and Tama's journey. Your feedback means everything to us.